My husband asked my sister to pretend to be his wife for a night. She said yes before he even asked me. He said it like he was asking me to pass the salt. I need Nikki to come to my reunion as my wife. I stopped chewing. I set my fork down on the plate, carefully, deliberately, the way you do when your body understands that a sudden movement might break something that can't be fixed, and looked at my husband across the dinner table, the dinner I had cooked, after the day I had. Say that again, I said. He did. Same words, same tone. The unhurried delivery of a man who has already run the calculation and decided the outcome is manageable. I waited for the part where it became a joke. I waited for the laugh, the obviously I'm kidding, the pivot that would make this a story we'd tell at other dinner tables someday. The time Daman said the most insane thing and Carissa's face went completely blank. The laugh didn't come. The pivot didn't come. There was just Daman, pushing food around his plate, and the particular quality of silence that fills a room when someone has said something they fully meant. Nikki, my sister, his wife, one night. I'm a family law attorney with 11 years of practice. I have sat across from hundreds of people in the worst moments of their marriages and helped them find language for things they couldn't yet name. I have read the body language of lying spouses in deposition for so long that it's become something close to a sixth sense. And sitting at my own dinner table, in my own house, I missed it for a year and a half. That is the part that still lives in me like a splinter I can't reach. My name is Carissa Voss, born Carissa Hale, professionally Carissa Voss since I took the bar, and I have been a practicing family law and divorce attorney in the Chicago area since I was 28 years old. I am now 39. I run a 5-attorney firm in River North. I own the house Daman and I lived in my name, purchased 3 years before we got married with money I saved during 7 years of grinding through associate positions at 2 different firms before I had enough to go independent. I want you to understand who I am before I tell you how thoroughly I got played. Because one of the most important things I have learned, both in courtrooms and in therapy, and yes, I have now done considerable amounts of both, is that intelligence does not protect you from betrayal. Competence does not protect you. Professional experience with the exact type of deception you are experiencing does not protect you. What protects you is information. And when the 2 people withholding information are the man who shares your bed and the sister you have subsidized through 6 years of emergencies, you are, professionally speaking, at a structural disadvantage. Daman Voss was 37 when this happened. He had the kind of looks that had served him all his life. Easy smile, good jaw, the particular charm of a man who made everyone feel specifically chosen. He had spent most of our marriage between opportunities, a phrase I coined to avoid the word unemployed because I loved him and because I told myself that some people needed longer runways and that his time was coming. I covered the mortgage, the insurance, the property taxes, the car payment he drove on my credit. I told myself it was partnership. He told his high school friends he'd married my sister. 10 years, not a slip, not a confused introduction at one party. A decade of sustained, deliberate fiction fed to the people from his hometown who knew Nikki and apparently thought she was the one worth keeping. I found out about the lie in the most efficient possible way. He told me himself because he needed me to facilitate the next chapter of it. I need Nikki to come to my reunion as my wife, he said. And then into the silence that followed. I already asked her. She said yes. He asked her first, before me. He had already had the conversation, already gotten the agreement, and now he was informing me the way you inform someone of a schedule change. By the way, your sister and I have a plan. Just wanted to loop you in. Why can't I go? I asked. He made the face. I had seen the face hundreds of times. The slight downward pull at the corners of the mouth, the tiny exhale that said, do I really have to explain this? It was the face of a man about to say something cruel and wanting you to feel responsible for making him say it. Because if I show up with you, I have to explain why I'm not married to Nikki. With you. Not my wife, not Carissa, just you. A pronoun with no warmth behind it. A placeholder for a person who didn't quite fit the story he was trying to tell. I looked at him. It's one night, he said. Don't be dramatic. Then he went back to his food, and I sat across the table from 11 years of marriage and felt something shift, very quietly, below everything. I went to bed that night at 10:47 p.m. and opened my laptop. I told myself I was checking email. I wasn't checking email. I opened our joint account, the one I had added him to when we got married because that is what you do. That is what trust looks like in a ledger, and went to the transfer history. Then I opened the records for the account I used to send Nikki money. 21 months, $23,800. Rent when her landlord raised it. Car payments when she fell behind. Phone bills, medical bills, the time her ceiling leaked and the landlord disputed liability, and she needed a deposit for a new place immediately. Every crisis was urgent. Every crisis was no one's fault. Every time I sent money, I told myself it was temporary, that she was getting her footing, that this was what sisters did. $23,800. I sat with that number for a while, then I opened her social media. The most recent post was from 3 days ago. Mirror selfie in a green dress I had never seen. Short caption, can't wait for November. November was the month of the reunion. I went back through her stories. Blurry, the way people post things they want visible but not examined. A restaurant table, somewhere nice, from the linens. A man's arm across the frame, just the cuff of a shirt and the watch face catching light. I knew that watch. I had spent 6 months researching it before I bought it. An IWC Portugueser, the Mark 16/8, steel case, black dial. I had given it to Daman on our 8th anniversary with a card that said for the man who makes every hour worth it. I had written that. I had meant it. I closed the the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I went to sleep in the guest room because I was not ready to be in the same bed as a man I was beginning to understand I had never fully known. The next day, I left work at 3:15 p.m. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving early. I didn't text Daman. I pulled into our garage, turned off the car, and sat for 1 full minute before going inside. I heard them before I reached the kitchen. Her laugh, then his. Not the polite laugh you use in front of other people. Not the social laugh, the private kind. Easy and unguarded. The laugh that means you are completely comfortable with the person you're in the room with. The laugh of two people who have been laughing together like this for long enough that they've stopped noticing how well it fits. They were on my couch. Nikki was sitting sideways, one knee up, facing him. Daman had his arm along the back of the cushion. Between them was the casual physical ease of people who have stopped negotiating the space between them. How did we meet? Daman was saying. Nikki smiled. She had that particular smile she'd had since we were children. Wide, self-aware, the smile of a woman who knows exactly the effect she's creating. At Lindsay Barron's birthday in Oakbrook, you came over with a drink and said you were impressed by my commitment to looking like I hated everyone. I stopped breathing. I stopped breathing because that was my story. Not an approximation, not a borrowed version. That was the exact night, the exact party, the exact joke. The thing Daman had actually said to me, the thing I had laughed at and told my college roommate about the next morning and thought about with warmth for a decade. They had taken my memory and put her name on it. I walked in, neither of them startled, neither of them jumped. Daman looked up and said, "You're early," with the mild annoyance of a man whose schedule has been inconveniently interrupted. Nikki gave me a little wave, the one she'd given me since we were kids, lazy and familiar. "Oh, you. We're just practicing," she said. I sat down in the armchair across from them, and I watched. They went through the rooftop proposal, mine, the weekend in Michigan when it rained for 2 straight days and we played cards and ordered pizza, and Daman said it was the best 48 hours of his life, mine. The anniversary dinner at Temperance, where I had made the reservation 4 months in advance, and Daman had shown up in a jacket he'd bought that afternoon because I'd once mentioned I liked him in structured shoulders, mine. Every good thing we had built together, handed to her in pieces. Every memory I had been carrying as evidence of a marriage worth believing in, now a script for a performance I hadn't been cast in. When I corrected one detail, the anniversary dinner was February, not March. Daman repeated it back in a high-pitched, mimicking voice. The anniversary dinner was February, not March. Nikki laughed. "Why don't you go do some work?" Nikki said, when the laughter settled. She said it sweetly. She had always been sweet the way something sharp can be sweet, the flavor first, then the cut. "Isn't that your zone?" I looked at her, then I looked at my husband. Then I stood and went upstairs. I stopped at the landing. Through the gap in the banister, I could see the couch. I stood very still. Daman raised his hand to her face, slow, unhurried, his thumb on her cheekbone. Not the tentative gesture of two people testing unfamiliar contact, but the practiced ease of people who have touched each other this way enough times that it no longer requires thought. Her eyes closed, their faces tilted toward each other by degrees. A floorboard moved under my foot. They pulled apart fast. "It's not what it looks like," Daman said. "We were rehearsing affection," Nikki said. "For the reunion. You have to be convincing." I came downstairs. I sat back in the armchair. I did not yell. I want to be clear about that, because every version of this story people imagine has me yelling. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not throw anything. I sat in the chair that was in the house that I owned, and I looked at my husband and asked him one question, clearly, the way you ask questions when you already know the answer, and you are choosing to make the other person say it out loud. "Are you sleeping with my sister?" He did not deny it. He told me I was controlling. He told me I turned everything into a courtroom. He told me the marriage was already dead, had been dead for a long time, and maybe we shouldn't be married at all. He said it like it was power. He said it like he was finally saying the true thing, the brave thing, and my job was to receive it. "Okay," I said. I stepped aside from the doorway. He walked past me into the bedroom. I went to my home office, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. Then I picked up my phone and called Patricia Huang. Patricia Huang had been my mentor since my second year of law school. She was now 61, senior partner at Huang and Associates in the Loop, 34 years of family law practice, the kind of attorney whose name makes opposing counsel recalculate their position before the first hearing. She had handled some of the most complicated high-asset divorce cases in Cook County. She had also, at my wedding, pulled me aside in the coat room and said, "You are the best thing at this party, and I hope he knows it." She picked up on the second ring. I said, "I need to retain you. Tonight." A pause. Patricia does not waste time on preamble. "Tell me," she said. I told her. All of it. The reunion request, the sister, the watch in the story photo, 21 months of transfers, the couch, the thumb on the cheekbone, the way he'd said maybe we shouldn't be married at all like he was handing me a gift. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for 4 seconds. "Is the house in your name only?" "Yes." "The vehicle he drives?" "My credit. His name on the registration." "Has he had any income in the past 12 months?" 4 months of contract work, February through May. I can pull the exact figures. Do that tonight. Also pull all joint account statements going back 36 months, every transfer to your sister with accompanying bank records, and any documentation you have of the personal property, specifically the watch. I have the receipt, the warranty card, the anniversary card in my handwriting. Perfect. Another pause. "Carissa, I need you to be the client right now, not the attorney. You're going to want to run the strategy yourself, and you cannot do that. Do you understand me?" "Yes," I said. "Good. My paralegal will send send you the retainer agreement in the next 20 minutes. Don't confront him again tonight. Don't tell your sister anything. Go through the house tomorrow when he's out and document everything that is yours. Already started, I said. She almost laughed. Of course you have. Call me at 8 tomorrow morning. I stayed in my office for the next 4 hours. I printed bank statements. I organized the transfer records by date, amount, and stated purpose. I pulled the property deed, the insurance policies, the vehicle registration, and every financial account Damon's name appeared on. I found the receipt for the IWC watch in my records folder, along with the warranty card, and a photo I'd taken of him wearing it at dinner the night I gave it to him, my handwriting on the card visible in the background. I created a folder on my encrypted drive labeled Exhibit A. Not for court yet, not formally, but because naming things gives you control of them. And right then, I needed every scrap of control I could hold. At 2:14 a.m., I emailed Patricia a full summary with attachments. At 2:19 a.m., she replied, "Good, get some sleep. This is going to be clean." I didn't sleep. But for the first time since dinner the night before, I felt the specific steadiness that comes when grief is channeled somewhere it can do work. The next 2 weeks were the performance of my professional life. Damon did not know I had retained Patricia. Damon did not know I had spent 4 hours building the initial documentation. Damon woke up the next morning, made coffee, and behaved exactly as he had before the dinner table conversation, with the mild, unconcerned ease of a man who had said his piece and was now waiting for things to rearrange themselves around his decision. He called it space. He said he thought we should give each other space while he figured things out. I said that sounded reasonable. I cooked dinner, I went to work, I came home. I said normal things in a normal voice and watched him assume that I was processing, that I was adjusting, that I was doing the slow, painful work of accepting a situation I had no power over. I was not processing, I was building. On day 4, I came home to find Nikki's overnight bag by the front door. I called Patricia from the bathroom. He's invited her to stay here. The bag is by the door. That is actually helpful, Patricia said. Document the bag. Do not engage. I'm filing Monday. I documented the bag. Then I went downstairs and made tea and offered Nikki a cup and she accepted, and we sat in my kitchen while she told me about a new job lead she was excited about, and I nodded and asked appropriate follow-up questions. She had no idea. That was the second hardest part of those 2 weeks. Not the anger, not even the grief, but the clarity that Nikki had never once in her life considered me a serious obstacle. I was the responsible one, the earner, the person who filled the structural role so she could fill the interesting one. I had been the background of her life since we were children, the sister who got good grades and paid bills and handled things, and she had simply extended that logic forward. I would handle this too. I would absorb it. I would adjust. She didn't factor in what I do for a living. She didn't factor in what I know about marital waste. She didn't factor in 11 years of watching people try to protect assets they should have moved faster. And most importantly, she didn't factor in Patricia Huang. Patricia filed the petition on a Monday morning. Damon was served at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday at the coffee shop on Dearborn, where he went every morning because he had very little else to structure his days around. I know the exact time because Patricia's process server, a meticulous woman named Sandra, who had been doing this work for 19 years, texted a confirmation photo immediately after service, his face in that photo. I have not looked at it many times, but I have looked at it enough. The filing was unremarkable on its surface. Dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, property division, no minor children, standard language, the kind of petition filed 50 times a week in Cook County. What was not standard was what arrived 3 days later through Patricia's office. The asset documentation. Marital waste in Illinois requires demonstrating that one spouse deliberately dissipated marital assets. It is not enough to show the money was spent. You must show it was spent improperly, outside the scope of marital benefit. What Patricia and her forensic financial consultant, David Park, CPA, 14 years of matrimonial financial analysis, had assembled was a chronological record of every financial action Damon had taken, using our joint resources that could not be characterized as marital benefit. The watch was on the list. $4,200, purchased with our joint account 6 days before I claimed it as an anniversary gift, which meant I had technically purchased him a gift with shared funds, and he was now using that asset in a relationship with another woman while requesting no-fault dissolution. The $23,800 in transfers to Nikki was more complicated. Patricia had considered it from several angles. He wasn't the one sending her the money, she said. You were, so we can't claim he dissipated it. But what we can document is the relational pattern, that he benefited from your continued financial support of your sister throughout a period during which he was conducting an undisclosed relationship with her. That speaks to the character of the concealment, and it speaks to the nature of the fraud on the marital partnership. She paused. It also speaks to damages, she added. I looked at her. What kind of damages? Illinois allows for contribution claims in divorce when one spouse can demonstrate they were the primary financial contributor to the marital estate and the other spouse committed a fraud that materially affected that contribution. It's fact-specific and not guaranteed, but given what you have, she tilted her head. David thinks it's worth arguing. The formal valuation of the marital estate, prepared by David Park and submitted as Exhibit E in the proceedings, established that I had contributed $1.2 million in net assets to the marriage over 11 years, including the home, retirement savings, and business equity. Damon's contributions totaled totaled $74,000 across 5 years of intermittent employment. The ratio was not in dispute. What was in dispute was how much of my contribution I was entitled to recover fully. Damon hired his own attorney, a man named Craig Forsyth, who had a decent reputation, and the significant disadvantage of being on the wrong side of a case being handled by Patricia Huang. Craig filed a response claiming equitable entitlement to a portion of the marital home's appreciated value on the basis of Damon's non-financial contributions to the marriage. Patricia read that filing and said, with the calm of someone who has been doing this long enough to find certain things genuinely funny, he's going to argue household contribution. He did not contribute to the household, I said. I know, she said. We'll let him say it under oath. The deposition took place on a Thursday morning in Patricia's conference room. Damon arrived in a blazer I hadn't seen before. Nikki had apparently been coaching his wardrobe along with everything else. He looked composed. He had that quality he'd always had, the ability to perform calm in high-stakes situations, the ease of a man who had never fully believed consequences were coming. Patricia deposed him for 3 hours and 40 minutes. I was not in the room. I was in an adjacent office, and the proceeding was recorded, and I have since listened to it twice. She was methodical. She started with the ordinary things: employment history, household responsibilities, financial contributions, asset acquisition. Damon answered fluently, reasonably, painting the picture of a man who had been a genuine partner in a marriage that had simply run its course. Then she got to the reunion. She asked him directly whether he had ever represented himself to third parties as being married to someone other than Carissa Voss. He said no. She produced the deposition of Marcus Elroy, one of Damon's high school friends who had agreed, after being approached by Patricia's investigator, to provide a statement. Marcus stated that for a period of not less than 10 years, Damon had consistently referred to Nicole Hale as his wife in conversations with their friend group and had never identified or referenced Carissa Voss as his actual spouse. Damon said Marcus must have been confused. Patricia produced the text message thread. Damon had texted Marcus 11 days before the reunion. Nikki's confirmed, she'll play the part, it'll be fine. Marcus, who apparently had his own discomfort with the situation, had kept the thread. Patricia asked Damon what play the part meant. He said it was a joke. She asked him whether it was also a joke that he had cohabited, during portions of our marriage, in a separate residence with Nicole Hale. He said that was not accurate. She produced the Harbor View building lease. Unit 12B, signed 18 months prior, with Damon Voss listed as an authorized occupant under the primary tenant name of Nicole Hale. Patricia's investigator had obtained this through a standard records request, after finding a charge on a joint credit card I rarely used, $47 at a hardware store on Erie Street. On a Tuesday, I was at a conference in D.C. A locksmith receipt, it turned out, for a key copy. For a second, in the recording, there is silence. The particular silence of a man recalculating everything. Then, Damon's attorney said, "We need a short break." The settlement conference was 6 weeks later. Craig Forsyth arrived with a revised position that bore very little resemblance to the opening entitlement claim. The non-financial contributions argument had been quietly set aside. The revised position was essentially a request for a clean exit with minimal financial exposure, and an agreement from my side not to pursue the contribution damages claim. Patricia looked at me across the conference table. "Your call," she said. I had thought about this. I had thought about it in the way that lawyers think about cases, not from the center of the emotion, but from the perimeter, where you can see the whole shape of it. What did I want? What was the most accurate translation of what had been taken from me? The house was mine. The business equity was mine. The retirement accounts, divided by the actuarial formula, heavily favored me given the contribution ratios. All of that was already established and not in meaningful dispute. What remained was the damages claim. What remained was the argument that his fraud on the marriage had cost me something that could be quantified. David Park had quantified it. $94,000. That was his conservative estimate of the marital waste and financial fraud damages. The watch, certain joint account expenditures that could be tied to the undisclosed relationship, and a calculation of the financial opportunity cost of the 11 months during which Damon had continued to receive marital financial benefits after the Harbor View lease was signed. I could pursue it. It would likely succeed, at least partially. It would also extend the proceedings by 4 to 6 months, increase costs for both sides, and require Nikki to be deposed, which Patricia said was a possibility worth preparing for. I looked at Craig Forsyth across the table. "I want 3 things," I said. Patricia put her hand lightly on my arm, her signal for "let me handle it." I looked at her. She looked at me. I nodded. She presented the 3 things. First, the IWC Portugueser watch, returned to me within 7 business days, in the same condition in which it was given, with a written acknowledgement that it was a gift I purchased and that its removal from the marital home constituted improper transfer of my personal property. Second, a financial settlement reflecting 90% of David Park's marital waste calculation, $84,600, structured as a lump sum within 60 days of finalization. Third, a written statement, not for public distribution, not for legal record, but for my own file, in which Damon acknowledged that for a period of not less than 18 months he had maintained an undisclosed relationship with Nicole Hale while holding himself out as my husband and receiving the financial benefits of our marriage. Craig Forsyth looked at the third item for a long time. "That's unusual," he said. "Yes," Patricia said. "It is." He went to confer confer with Daman in the hallway. They were out there for 11 minutes. When Craig came back, he sat down and said, "He'll sign the first two. He won't sign the third." I had expected this. "Then we go to litigation," Patricia said pleasantly. "And the entire record of the Harbor View apartment, the deposition, the Marcus Elroy text thread, and the lease become part of the public court filing, which I'm sure his attorney has explained to him." Another trip to the hallway. 7 minutes. Daman signed all three. The finalization was on a Thursday afternoon in January. I dressed in a charcoal pantsuit because I am a lawyer, and I understand the language of clothing in institutional settings. I sat in the courtroom and watched a judge review our agreement and ask the standard questions and enter the standard findings and end, in approximately 11 minutes of procedural language, the 11 years of marriage I had believed in, with a completeness I now find almost impossible to reconstruct. Daman was on the other side of the courtroom. He did not look at me when it was over. I watched him leave with Craig Forsyth and felt, this is the honest thing. The thing I've had to say in therapy enough times that it no longer surprises me. Almost nothing. Not relief, not devastation. The particular flatness of an ending that has been so thoroughly prepared for that the actual moment passes without ceremony. The grief had already happened. It had happened on a Monday night when I slept in the guest room and looked at a number on a laptop screen. It had happened in small, specific ways every day for 6 weeks while I cooked dinner and spoke normally and built the case that would end things cleanly. Grief doesn't wait for the official moment. It happens on its own schedule. I walked out of the courthouse with Patricia, who squeezed my arm once and said, "Beautifully done. You did the work," I said. "You gave me something to work with." Nikki called me for the first time since the filing in February. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 4 minutes long and covered, in roughly equal portions, her reasons, her perspective, her hurt feelings about how the process had unfolded, her position that I had weaponized the legal system against two people who had simply followed their feelings, and, in the final 40 seconds, an acknowledgement that she was sorry and that she hoped we could eventually talk. I have not returned the call. I have thought about whether I will. My therapist, Dr. A. Renata Cole, 22 years in practice, specializing in relational trauma and family systems, has a perspective on this that I find useful. The question of whether to reconnect with someone who has betrayed you is not primarily a question of forgiveness. Forgiveness is internal. It has nothing to do with the other person. The question is whether reconnection serves your actual life going forward, and whether the conditions for a different kind of relationship exist. I don't know yet if they do. What I know is that I am not required to decide on anyone else's timeline. The watch came back in a padded mailer with a handwritten note from Craig Forsyth, indicating that it was being returned in accordance with the settlement terms. I put it in a drawer for 3 weeks. Then I took it out and looked at it. The steel case, the black dial, the anniversary card I had written in February of a year that no longer felt like mine. For the man who makes every hour worth it. I thought about that for a long time. Then I took it to a jeweler on Oak Street and had it sized for my own wrist. It fits perfectly. 6 months later, I am sitting in my office on a Thursday afternoon in the last light of a Chicago October, which is the best light of any city I have ever been in, and I am working on a case for a client who is going through a divorce she did not want and does not yet believe she will survive. I know she will survive it. I know because I have now survived one. Which sounds obvious. Of course she survived. She's the one telling the story. But if you have ever sat in the middle of an ending and tried to imagine the future and found the imagination would not cooperate, you understand that survival is not a foregone conclusion. You understand that the hardest part is not the legal work or the financial work, or even the loss of the person you thought you married. The hardest part is the revision. Going back through 11 years and asking which parts were real, which moments belonged to us, and which belonged to something he was building away from me. The rooftop proposal, was he thinking of her then? The Michigan weekend, had it already started? The anniversary dinner, the watch, the card I wrote with my whole heart, how much of it was a performance for my benefit while the actual story was being written somewhere else? I have decided to stop asking. Not because the questions aren't worth asking, but because they have no answers that will help me. The past is finished. Whatever it was, it is now a fixed and final thing, and I can spend the rest of my life inside it, or I can build forward. I am building forward. The watch is on my wrist. The house is mine. The work is mine. And the story, the actual story, the one with my name in it and my memories intact and my name on the deed, that has always been mine. He just forgot for a while that I was the one writing it.